Well, good morning, everybody. Good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you may be watching from. It's always great to be here with our family and to study about spiritism and topics such as this one that a lot of times we don't want to talk about. We don't want to talk about death. We don't want to talk about dying. We don't want to talk about the process. I mean, a clear example is when a couple of nights my husband asked me if he discarnated, if I would, go be close to my sister-in-law. And I'm like, I don't want to talk about this, right? We don't want to talk about our loved ones passing. We don't want to be separated from them, right? And there are very few people that do want it because it's the best thing. Because usually if they want it, there may be something wrong, right? But this is a very important topic. And I just wanted to bring out that we utilize the book After Death by Leon Denis. It is available. One of the latest one that just came out, translated by Daryl Kimball and Marcia Sias from the original French edition. And I also wanted to point out the books Heaven and Hell, that this month in August celebrates 160 years since the release. And it's a very important book. Dealing with topics such as hell, heaven, purgatory, limbo, and also talking about the passage, what happens during the discarnation process, and also bringing examples, as we're going to mention later on, of spirits that basically came back to tell us about their experience, not only while they were incarnated in the flesh, but also what happened to them after passing. And also the book Workers of the Life Eternal, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the 5th book in the Andreia Lewis Life in the Spirit Realm series. A lot of people know the book Nos Solar. It starts with Nos Solar, Austria City, but the name of the colony is Nos Solar. And Andreia Lewis brings us his ongoing course, if you will, in the spirit plane. And in this case, in this book, the discarnation process of 5 different individuals in different religious beliefs and also lifestyle, mentioning also euthanasia, which is really interesting because a lot of times we see euthanasia. I remember following this young woman. She had a very painful tumor in her head that would give her awful headaches. And she couldn't stand it anymore. She was very young. Imagine this, young in her 30s, beautiful. If you looked at her, there was nothing wrong. But inside, she felt the anguish of the pain of what she was feeling. And lo and behold, she felt that the only way out would be euthanasia. And so the knowledge of spiritism and the spirit plane and the reality of our future upon discarnation would help us in making decisions such as euthanasia, seeking death by consuming drugs as in an overdose, and suicide, which is it's not a sin in the religious views, but the consequences of committing suicide is very painful for the spirit. So we're not talking about punishment, we're talking about consequences that the spirit feels upon discarnating in such a way. Violent deaths also discussed. What happens to the spirit upon discarnating from a violent death. And I just wanted to point out that the things that I'm going to say here today, it's not a general rule. As much as we don't reincarnate the same way, we don't discarnate the same way. So if I say, for example, that the spirit feels this or that, it is an example. So it's not general rule. Just wanted to make clear everybody understands that, right? So I wanted to bring this beautiful phrase by Tagore when he was alive, and in which he said, "Death is not extinguishing the light. It is only putting out the lamp because the dawn has come." Beautiful, beautiful way of seeing death. Tagore had a very close relationship with death because within a very short period of years, he lost his best friend, his wife, and his kids. So, the idea that he was able to see death in such a way teaches us a lot about seeing it from a different perspective, right? to be able to bring this. I don't know if you guys know this, but in 1930, he had a meeting with Einstein in which they discussed the views of life, him from this perspective, this philosophy, and then Einstein from his, intellectual and extremely smart point of views. So I found this today, and I actually got a book from the essay that is taken to read a little bit later on. So as I was searching for information about this study, because I also like to bring, real life things, I came upon an article also that talked about Steve Jobs' final moment. I don't know if you guys know about this, but when he was about to discarnate, he would look at his wife, at his kids, and then pass them as if he was looking at something else, and he would go, "Oh, wow, wow, wow." I get goosebumps. But what is it that he was looking at, right? What is it that he was seeing? If you've ever been at a hospice situation, if you've ever gone to a hospice, I have a couple of times because of my grandfather and his second wife. It is interesting what happens at a hospice setting. And a lot of times, people that are already in the disengagement process, although we can't see it in our eyes, but they are already going through the signs in which the nurses have been educated in telling us, listen, this is what's happening to your loved one, so you need to be ready. If you have any final words, things like that. And although it is really painful, it is also a very beautiful moment in which we can provide loving vibration to the loved ones so that they feel secure in leaving. Like the door is open and it's okay for you to go, right? So I remember, for example, my grandfather's second wife. I wasn't very close to her, but I remember that we were there because, she was actually, showing signs that she was about, within like maybe a few days of dying. And I think like 6 weeks went by and she didn't. So she had to go back home because hospice is for that. It's the terminally ill. And, she had an improvement, but she would say to me, can you get that chair out of the way? Because there is a man sitting there. He's wearing a dark cape and a dark hat, and I don't want to see him, right? And in other cases, we would see situations like for my grandfather when he had a stroke and we were concerned about him. And so we decided to take him to the hospital. And I remember going to his house before the ambulance took him. And I was with somebody who was really close to me, and she was a medium. And I mean, my grandfather, he's the earliest memories I have of knowing what love is. That's what he is to me. He's everything. And so I was extremely sad about his passing, but he said, "Look, Andreia, look who came to see me. It's my wife and the nurse." He wasn't talking about the second wife. He was talking about the first one. His true love. His true love. Not to say that the other wasn't important, but the other one had more, of course, more connection to him. And my aunt, in Brazil we call them aunts, tia, she said, "It's true. I see her. She's got, and she described her, and it was exactly his wife, Barbara, who was there. And then after he was taken to the hospital, he fell into a coma. 2 weeks later, he died, right? So it's really beautiful to see that we do have concrete examples of people that are in the dying phases, that they see their loved ones, or they see the beyond. Oh, wow. There is a video going around of a little boy who is blonde, and just in case, I'm describing him because he's blonde, and he's looking up, and his mother recorded the video because I think he had like a near-death experience, and when he came back, he was looking at the spirit plane, and he is like, "This is, oh my God, it's so beautiful, it's so beautiful." And then he sees his father, who had died a few months or a few years prior. And he says, "I promise I'll be good to mommy. I promise. Can I please have a hug?" I get goosebumps. You got to watch this video. I'll try to put it in our WhatsApp group if you guys want to see it. A clear demonstration that although for a lot of people, it's maybe like they're fantasizing or they're having an illusion, or they're having, a vision that doesn't mean anything. For us that have knowledge of this spirituality, and even those that have the question of the what if, it's extremely comforting. So death is not extinguishing the light. It is only putting out the lamp because the dawn has come. Beautiful, beautiful saying from him. So, oh wow, it's probably not a bad way to express what we are going through at the time that we are about to go through death. So, in the hospice care, we've already talked about this. There are also nurses that have posted videos on TikTok and Instagram about their own experiences, and the family allows them to show what's happening to their loved ones because they want to educate us, how to tell the signs, or, if your loved one is becoming agitated, how to deal with it and not have to become extremely stressed or even what's the word that I'm looking for? Desperate, because the way that we feel, the way that we react, the way that we embrace our loved ones, they feel it, which is why in hospice care and in the book, Workers of the Life Eternal, Andreia Lewis narrates to us, when somebody's in the hospice care and we're sitting there, and of course we're feeling sad and we don't want to let them go, and at times we are unaware of the fluidic energies that we are emanating to the loved ones. And so the benevolent spirits that are with us at all time will say, you know what, let's give Andreia a sudden jolt of energy, so that her loved ones can go home and we can do the work of the disengagement. And so all of a sudden I'll sit up in bed. I'm like, hey guys, how's it going? Oh my God, just feeling better. Yeah, go home, shower, eat something, come back later. And lo and behold, a few hours later, the spirit has already passed on. And the benevolent spirits are so concerned with us during the entire process of our life and life after life that they're there to assist. And this is also something extremely comforting, because at the same token that when we are reincarnating, there is a hospital there with a doctor welcoming us and family members around us crying of joy that we are born, we are also being reborn on the other side, and we have loved ones waiting for us, and even benevolent spirits to receive us as if we are being born again. To die, to be born, and born again, such is the law. I forgot the case of Allan Kardec, but basically telling us about the infinite process of the coming and goings of the spirit as much as needed so that it can achieve perfection, so that it can ascend, so that it can become better and better and evolve in such a way. But I've died. Now what?
Don't look dead.
I know. I don't look dead, right? But what is our role? How is the disengagement from the spirit? Ever wonder what our own process is going to be like? I mean, if death came knocking at our door, and it's inevitable, death and taxes, right? Inevitable. How would we die? I mean, we got to think about this. Would we be ready? Would we be scared to the point where the disengagement process would become even more difficult because we're trying to cling on to life? What would our concerns and worries be? Where would our hearts, where would our minds be? Is it in my wealth that I'm leaving to my kids, the lack thereof that I didn't have to leave for them? Or is it the guilt because I wasn't able to get the forgiveness for actions done during this lifetime? Or rather, forgiving those that offended us in this lifetime. How do I feel? And so on Spiritism, it's going to tell us, the book by Leon Denis is going to tell us, life may escape us tomorrow. None of us are going to escape death. So how is it that we get ready? Do other people come back to tell us how it is? Of course, we've already mentioned this, Heaven and Hell, the book that is being studied now every Thursday online, available, in which the cases of different types of spirits are studied. Dialogue between Allan Kardec and the mediums in the Spirit Society, Parisian Spiritist Society, which was open in 1858, and they had these mediumistic meetings in which spirits in all sorts of state of mind would communicate. So spirits in their happy conditions, having completed what they were supposed to, either on that same life or previous ones, Average, suffering spirits, spirits who committed suicide, repentant, hardened, and spirits with the earthly expiations. And when we read these spirits, one can't help but wonder what category we find ourselves in. Am I suffering? So if I am suffering, how would I be at the disengagement process? Have I committed suicide? No, I didn't do anything. Well, Andrew Lewis thought he didn't commit suicide, but he did, indirectly, through all the excesses of the physical body. Meaning the physical body, this garment, was bombarded by toxins, poison of all sorts. And we're not just talking physical. We're talking about sentiments, feeling, emotions that bombard our physical body as well. And there is a case of one of the books by Andrew Lewis also, in which there was a gentleman who, actually it's not by Andrew Lewis, I apologize, it's Hilario Silva. And he talks about this guy that spent 20 years, or better yet, he wasted 20 years of what he was supposed to live because of his feelings, his temperament. So he was supposed to die at 82, and he died at 62. So it's interesting because we don't really stop to think about our reality. We're so actually busy contemplating the physical one. We're so busy contemplating that which holds us still in this life that we ignore the other one. And there is a saying in Matthew in which Jesus said, first seek the kingdom of God and everything else will fall into place. Meaning, don't pay so much attention to the material one. Live according to your reality. You are an immortal spirit, and you're having a physical existence, an experience. So make the most of it while you're here, but don't get attached to it. Being in the world and not belonging to it, meaning that which attached us during the time. So, the discarnate spirit carries within itself, visible to all, its heaven and hell. A lot of times we question, am I going to go to heaven? Am I going to go to hell? Very common questions. I mean, I used to, because I grew up and I'm very grateful for growing up with Catholicism because it gave me the balance and the foundation of God, of understanding, that I am a child of God. And those Spiritism comes and answers every other question that I couldn't get an answer to with following that religion. Very noble religion, by the way, depending on how we carry it out. But we would question, am I going to heaven? Am I going to hell? Factors deciding based on our actions in the here and now, right? So a lot of times would be fearful of God. So a very curious phrase, God, how is it it's called, fearful? God, are you a God-fearing person? Isn't that something that is very common in English? God-fearing, right? God-fearing. And I always thought that it was so, because I don't fear God. If God is all love and is my Father, my Creator, then I don't fear God, but rather what I should fear, rather be concerned with, is how I live. Because the laws, the divine laws, are engraved in our consciousness. This is why we carry within ourselves our heaven and our hell. Everything that we've done, it's as if it's reflected within the divine laws to see if we were able to, make a connection. The law of reincarnation, the law of labor, the law of charity and justice, and everything else. So they're going to tell us that spirits have come in multitudes to teach us about the sensations that precede and follow death, which depends on the character merits, on the character's moral uprightness of the spirit. So they're talking about the merit and the morality, meaning the ethics, how we've lived our lives. Now, mind you, a lot of people will say, well, I lived in accordance to what I believe to be right and upright. So my belief system also is going to take a role in it. And I'm just saying this because a lot of times what we feel is not moral, for others it is. It's the difference, the age of the spirit, the maturity or lack thereof, that also is taken into consideration. So there is not going to be any punishment. There's not going to be any, strike of a lightning bolt, It's not that at all. It's, I know. And so in just thinking about this, I kept thinking about Steve Jobs. Oh, wow, wow. Not in fearful way, but in wonder, in wonder. Now, do we know about his life? We know about his public life. We know about what he's done. We don't know about his private life. The private life determining that, oh, wow factor. I, for one, keep imagining this, oh, wow, that he was looking so much in wonderment. They're going to keep telling us that in general, the soul's disengagement is less painful after a long illness because it has the effect of gradually untying the bonds of the flesh. This is Leon Denis giving us some of the impressions and sensations that may await us. And I remember when my father, in 2015, he was given, 8 months, 6 to 8 months to live because he had pulmonary cancer, which actually, created metastasis. So I remember, thinking of my dad, and I needed consolation. And so I opened one of the books by Andreia Lewis, and he talked about how a long illness was already the process of the spirit that was disengaging from the physical body. And that brought a lot of consolation. Because although the spirit is suffering, it's the process already. So that at the moment, at the appointed moment, it's like a fruit. You touch it and it falls. Right? If you try to tug it, something that is not yet ripe, right? Not only is it hard, but there's also that little fluid that comes out of it. I'm just trying to explain this. Let's say it's the vital fluid, right? It's hard. And so this disengagement process that is actually starting already with a terminal illness. But if I hear, Andreia, you've got cancer, what is my first sensation, feeling, emotion? I mean, that is the worst word. And of course we should. What is that law called? Preservation. We have the law of preservation. We want to preserve our lives. We want to live. And a lot of times it's not the fear of death in itself, but rather, I don't want to leave my loved ones behind. I'm not ready. I love life. I want to be part of my grandbabies. I want to see my daughter get married. I want to see my child graduating from high school. And that's noble, that's very real, and that's very important. But we forget about the reincarnatory process. Andreia Lewis tells us about the case of Segismundo, Suggi, a lot of people call Suggi, remember John? And Segismundo was going to reincarnate, and he was given 50 years to live. That was his reincarnatory plan. He was going to live 50 years. He had killed both his future parents-to-be in a previous existence. Yep, his future parents were going to receive him as a child. And that is called benevolence. And that is based on the law of love, charity, and justice. Love, justice, and charity. Yeah, justice, love, and charity. We don't know which one comes first, which one comes last, right? I mean, it's one law. And although we're like, my God, how could God do that? I mean, Jean killed me and Yuri, and he's going to be my father right? Imagine that. But it's the process of forgiveness. And Segismundo was given 50 years because of the death that he had caused. And how was he going to die? Heart attack. Heart attack. Why? The fluidic body, the semi-material body called the perispirit that, a lot of us know here, but if you're listening for the first time, is that intermediary that allows us to dive into the flesh. Everything that we do gets archived. If, let's imagine a pot, perfect in its shape, if I bang on it and I create a dent in it, in the future, if I'm to bake, I'm going to bake a cake with a dent. So if every action that I have is going to have a reaction, there's going to be consequences. If I was responsible for someone's death, which is not according in accordance with the divine laws. I created a situation for myself. It's not God punishing me. So the dent is there, and I want to be reborn so that I can make up for that. And not only do I want it, at times I beg for the opportunity. So when death comes knocking, although it's very natural that we don't want to go through it, it's inevitable. And at times, although life may escape us and there is no going around it, the benevolent spirits will tell us about being ready. So I am going on a cruise in November. And I'm already thinking about, everything that I'm going to do. The first thing is, if anybody gets it right, they'll get a book. What's the first thing I want to do?
Eat.
No, lose weight. I don't want to eat. I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. I want to pack for it. I want to think about the best overall kaftas, the bikini. I want to think about, what I'm going to do at the cruise. I'm getting ready for it. But if I think about death, I don't want to think about how I'm getting ready for it, because people say, wow, that's very macabre, and you think it's dark. It's not that I want to die, I'm going to commit suicide because I'm looking forward to it. No, it's understanding that the more I live in accordance to the spirit, the less attached to the flesh I will be. That's the reality. There is, in one of the books by Andreia Lewis, also in the series, a situation in which they're walking and they get into the cemetery, and there is a man. There is a spirit on top of his tomb. His body has already rotted. There's nothing there, only bones. It's decayed already. It's been eaten by the worms. But he can't leave. Although he tries, he is automatically drawn back. Why? His main concern was his wealth. That was his main concern. And so when we think of it, my God, why doesn't he break out of it? Well, at times it takes a while. And this is why they're going to tell us that the impressions at times is more painful and prolonged depending on the person's own moral qualities or lack thereof. At times the soul is going to experience all the commotions, all the upheavals of the material body. Painful, filled with anguish. For some, death is for others a gentle sleep followed by a delightful awakening. And so the disengagement for some is quick. The passage is easy for those who have fulfilled their duties. Wow. Obedience and resignation in the chapter that we're called upon to be perfect. And one item called duty. It is not by chance that we have these information in these books. The spirits weren't bored. They wanted to bring us content that we could live by. Understanding that duty is our responsibility, first with us and immediately towards our neighbor. Hard, right? But not impossible. So, for those who beforehand had detached themselves from the things of this world and had aspired to the spiritual thing. But there are those who had failed to prepare for the departure because the material pleasures, the sensations, sensuality, all of that is still attached, is still very strong. And it's because of our millenary habits, right? So we reincarnate again with a lot of what we've acquired through successive lives. And we're going to carry that with us as well. So the idea is not to load the baggage, it's to unload. It's to unload. Leave it here. Leave it here so that it's not so heavy when we go through customs. If you want to say that, spiritual customs, right? So the time of separation is also cruel for the spirit who believes in nothing. It clings desperately to life that is escaping. Doubt creeps in. It sees a terrible world open up like an abyss, and it's afraid to allow itself to fall in. Nothingness is a concern as well. So there is this struggle between the matter that is being abandoned and the spirit that is bent to hold on to the body. However, the separation between soul and body is followed by a confusion regardless of whether the separation was easy, was calm, or whether it was full of struggles. whether it was painful, instead of confusion. So on Saturday, we had an engagement, and please don't judge me. I love to sleep. Maybe it's because I like to be in the spirit plane. I don't know if anybody else loves to sleep, but I do. I mean, if you let me, I'll go. So we had a meeting at noon, and I have a little bit of insomnia, so I went to bed really late, and I think it was almost 3 when I finally fell asleep. And so I didn't sleep a lot, right? I mean, if it's noon, if I go to sleep at 3 in the morning, it's not a lot. Yes, yeah, it's not a lot. So Marcelo's like, "You're meeting," and I jump out of bed, and I didn't know what day it was, I didn't know where I was or what was happening. State of confusion, right? That they compare to of waking up from a deep sleep. That's what they talk about. This confusion, the state of confusion. Yeah, it was yes. No, it was Saturday. What's today? Sunday. Yeah, I'm still asleep. Suicides are prey to horrible sensations. John and I were talking, a few maybe years ago, right, John, about in Divaldo Franco, that medium that has helped us so much with the books that he's channeled, and Divaldo was telling us that he had seen the spirit, approaching with a lot of light and with a benevolent spirit beside him. And he was shocked because he could swear that person was up to no good, not good at all, rotten to the very core. And he was so surprised to see that it wasn't like that there was so much love for that being and that he had the qualities within. And then he stopped looking at people in that way. And so I'm just saying this because not all cases of suicides are the same. Remember I said in the beginning. So if I die by suicide because I had a moment of insanity, let's take that into consideration as opposed to knowing exactly what I'm doing. So there is a quota of responsibility, right, that differs from one to the other. But Leon Denis is going to tell us they feel for years the anguish of their final hour. They realize with horror that they have only exchanged their earthly suffering for an even greater one. And what is the greatest disappointment according to the spirits in the spirits book? What is the greatest disappointment a suicide spirit faces upon?
That nothing ends and it gets worse because of the suicide.
That nothing ends. And it does get worse because of suicide. Forever? No, of course not. Of course not. There's a lot that is taken into consideration, right? And then they're going to say, in the book Workers of the Life Eternal, which is this book right here. Hold on, if you're wanting to look at it. This is the book here, but I just want to go back to it, in which they're going to tell us that a lot of times there is a peaceful, resigned, even cheerful state of mind for those where they had a righteous spirit, meaning they lived in accordance to the moral laws, made an effort to it, not that they were perfect, made an effort. This is why in the Spirit's book they say, or in the Gospel, that a true spiritist is recognized by the effort that he or she makes in order to combat one's own vices, internal vices, so that the part of the soul, having fought hard and suffered, leaves the earth confident in the future. Completist, right, is what they call. They've completed all that they were supposed to. It is actually a term in the series by Andreia Lewis. And then sudden violent deaths occurring in organic life and its fullness produce a painful rending. It throws the soul into a prolonged confusion. So it's interesting because in the book, Workers of the Life Eternal, the 5 cases that they study, one of them is called Cavalcanti. And Cavalcanti was, he was about to die. He was terminally ill there, but he was suffering a lot and he was very agitated. And the doctor, thinking that, he needed to be taken out of his own struggle, decided that euthanasia would be the most compassionate thing to do. And so the benevolent spirits, sensing what the doctor was up to, try to work fast to disengage Cavalcanti, but it's too late. And what happens is, let's consider this: physical body, perispirit, which is the intermediary between the physical body and the spirit. It is very intimately tied when we are incarnated, the cells, the molecules. And so when that euthanasia was, injected into his vein, the blood flow, Cavalcanti actually disengaged, dying from it, but he couldn't really disengage. So he stayed feeling that sensation. The spirits had a really hard time getting him out of that situation. It's as if he was still feeling all that process. And so it's one of the cases. We need to read. It's not to be afraid, it's to be informed. It's to be informed. And this is why Spiritism is so great, because it informs us. Listen, this is what the reality truly is. So think twice before every action, before every decision. But the narrative is going to describe this rescue mission by very enlightened spirits that come to assist those that are approaching the end of their lives. And Andreia Lewis learns about the compassionate work that goes behind the assistance of the death and dying process. And this is where it gets really, really, really cool. Because in the book, they're going to tell us that there are groups of spirits that are interested. You know how you go to medical school? John went to medical school and he wanted to be a dentist, a surgeon. That was his preference. John, my goodness, what a difficult decision, right? Like pulling teeth. They say that it's like pulling teeth, so hard. Compassionate dentist, by the way. But then I go to medical school and I'd rather go to cardiology. Or actually, you know what? I'd rather work with kids. I want to work with feet, people, all of the different choices. So the spirits, the compassionate spirits in the spirit plane that work and assisting in the disengagement process, at times they choose the group of people in different situations they want to try. For example, children who discarnate early, that's their specialty. Or mothers who die during the process of giving birth. Can you imagine how awful that is? Or in the case of calamities and collective death, if we read the book Planetary Transition, which is ongoing. Have you gotten to that yet, David? Chapter 8. Wow. So you've gotten there already? Okay, so they form camps, if you will, getting ready, because they knew of that calamity that was about to take place in tsunami in the 2004. That was a natural disaster. In the book Planetary Transition, it's explained really well. And they had already been prepared for what was about to happen. World War II. The book Nosso Lar brings us information on how they were ready to receive the spirits who were discarnating at that time. And I started to think about the infinite love that is a reflection of God that is shown down upon us at one of the moments that we consider to be the darkest, when in reality it's the dawn, right? Waking us up to the real life, the true life, the spirit life. And so in studying these cases, they teach us about this diversity of experience that is shaped by one's moral and spiritual life, since not all dying processes are the same. And they're going to tell us that although we have these compassionate groups of spirits that help us in the discarnation process, no one improvises serenity at the threshold of death, meaning, at the time that is happening, we're not going to have time to improvise anything. This is why we have to be ready. If desperation is what we think we're going to have, we have to be very careful, right? We're not going to improvise what we're feeling and thinking at the moment of death. This is a line from Druso in Workers of the Life Eternal that is talking about also how our daily attitudes is reflected at the moment of death. And that's why we can't improvise. So our daily attitudes. And we're not talking about moments of, intemperance, or impatient, like this morning when I was trying to get here and I got both bridges. And then, I had when I finally got out of it, there was a group of bikers, cyclists, who were riding on Biscayne, and you can't honk your horn. You have to respect them. It's their right, right? But you're concerned about, we're not talking about, that's normal. But how we treat our neighbors, our loved ones, how we treat ourselves, how we are in society, how we work, how we conduct ourselves, how we deal with situations that come about daily attitudes, so that we don't improvise. Every attachment we nourish on earth is a weight we must release when crossing into the spiritual plane. Am I guilty of something? Do I feel guilty about something? That's a weight that, if we are ever present in a mediumistic meeting, we're going to see suffering spirits because of guilt. Because of guilt. That's one of the great ones. And that's why we have psychologists, psychiatrists. We have professionals in the field to help us out. Because life is hard. The benevolent spirit, the friendly spirit in the gospel according to Spiritism will say, life is hard, I know. It is made up of 1,000 insignificant pinpricks that hurt us along the way. It's Joanna de Angelis, actually, in the gospel according to Spiritism. They understand that living is hard. We've accepted the challenge of reincarnating at a time of trials and expiations. Look at our world right now. Seems like very far away, right? Marcella and I were talking about spirits that reincarnated. I was simply washing dishes, and I thought, what would happen if a spirit, if a being from Africa, was in my kitchen right now? Would they know how to utilize all this stuff? Would it be hard to teach them, right? Meaning, what was I thinking about? Our world is very small. It's not big. What's happening out there, we can make a difference by collaborating, contributing, so that the noise is not louder than it already is. We talk about bombarding different countries. I'm not going to mention because I don't want anybody to think about political matters, but what about the bombs that we throw in our own homes of discord, the lack of love, the lack of patience in society? What about the bomb of hatred that I throw out constantly? That's emanation from my heart. Now, if I am aware of the power of prayer, for example, if prayer is constant in my life, I'm accustomed to reaching that frequency. We can imagine that the dying might become a lot easier because I'm accustomed to that. I'm seeking. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all else things will be added to you, which makes us reflect on our reality and how we're living, so that after death, we are not taken by surprise of what is actually happening to us. There is a reason Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God and all else things will be added to you, meaning that there will be provided. There is actually the care from the spirit plane for us, which is not to say have a job. Of course, it's the law of labor. It's not to say seek the material sustenance so that you can have a comfortable life. But then the gospel is going to tell us about the superfluous and what's the other one? Necessary. The necessary. What do we want, right? So I just wanted to bring this. It's really hard to talk about this. I'm sorry I've gone a little bit over the time. It's really hard to talk about this topic just in the short moment that we had. But we need to talk about these topics. We need to be made aware of how we are when our loved one is passing. In the book Workers of the Life Eternal, Demas, there is a process of his wake, and people are having frivolous conversation during the wake. They're laughing. They're talking about matters that are not at all uplifting and enlightening, and his spirit was feeling that. So it's good to educate people on how to be during a wake. We're not going to be depressed. We're going to be serene. We're going to pass on this to the spirit, that feeling that it's okay, especially if the spirit may still be attached to that physical body, clinging onto the life it wants so bad. So this is what we wanted to bring with this study. We hope that you do seek this book, After Death, and all of the other books by Leon Denis that have already been translated. And read the book, Workers of the Life Eternal. It's extremely enlightening. And if you have any other questions, we are here to answer. If you're online and you have questions, you may also reach us at Conscious LSG and Instagram. Thank you so much and have a great day.